The man who bought the photographs came every Saturday for almost a year, and I never once asked his name. I run a booth at the Keller's Flea Market off Ogeechee Road, south side of Savannah. Been there since 2017. Estate sale stuff, mostly. Costume jewelry, some vintage kitchen, and a lot of what my mother would have called other people's memories. Old albums, loose photographs, funeral programs, letters tied with rubber bands. You'd be surprised what people throw out when a grandparent dies. The market opens at 6 on Saturdays. He was always there by 7:30, same routine. He'd nod, not smile, and go straight to the 2 shoeboxes I kept on the corner of the table, both full of photographs. No albums, no frames, just the loose ones, priced $1 each or 12 for 10. He was maybe 40. Thin, wore a khaki jacket even in July, had this way of holding a photo up close to his face, not squinting, just looking like he was checking something on the back of it. Then he'd stack the ones he wanted on the corner of my table in a neat pile, never haggled, paid cash, small bills, always folded once. The first time, he bought 9. I remember because I threw in a 10th for free and he refused, slid it back across the table and said, "Just these." His voice was soft, kind of hoarse, Georgia accent but flattened out, like he'd lived somewhere else for a while. By the 3rd or 4th Saturday, I started to notice the pattern. He didn't want families, didn't want groups, didn't want babies, weddings, anything with a caption on the back saying, "Aunt May, Christmas 62. He wanted portraits, one person, looking at the camera, old ones, 40s through the 70s mostly, the kind where the subject didn't quite know how to arrange their face yet, so they just stared. I asked him once, casual, if he collected them for something, genealogy maybe, or art. He was sorting through the box at the time. He didn't look up. "They keep me company," he said. Then he laughed, a small, dry laugh like he was letting me off the hook, and added, "Sorry, that sounded weird. My mother used to have a wall of them. Reminds me of home." That was enough for me. People come to flea markets with stranger stories than that. A woman 2 aisles down sold nothing but taxidermied squirrels dressed as historical figures. You learn not to poke at the customers, so he came and he bought, and I stocked up. I started going to estate sales specifically for the boxes of orphan photos nobody wanted. 50 cents for a Ziploc of 40 pictures. I'd resell them to him at $1 each and clear $30 a Saturday off him alone. He was the best regular I had. A few other things I noticed over the months and filed away without making anything of them. He never bought a photo of a child. Not once. If a kid was in the picture, even in the background, he put it back. He liked women more than men, but he bought both. He always turned each photo over before he decided. If there was writing on the back, he set it aside. He wanted them blank, anonymous, and he asked me twice if I ever got any from around Effingham County. I said I didn't sort them by where they came from. He nodded, like that was the answer he expected, and went back to the box. The last Saturday he came was late February, I think the 27th. It was cold that morning and half the vendors hadn't set up. He bought 11 photos, paid with a folded 20 and a folded one, and told me, "Thank you." That was the only Saturday he ever said thank you. I noticed it at the time, and then I didn't think about it again for 4 weeks. The story broke on a Wednesday. I don't watch local news, but my sister sent me a link. WTOC out of Savannah, a bulletin about a man arrested in Rincon on unrelated charges. Vehicular thing, I think, plus something about a woman who had filed a report. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the photo they used. Booking photo. Thin face, khaki collar, just visible at the bottom of the frame. I knew him before I finished reading the headline. The article was short. It mentioned that during a search of his residence, officers had found hundreds of vintage photographs displayed on the interior walls of the home, described by investigators as items of interest. That was the exact phrase, items of interest, not evidence. There was a line further down that said the arrangement was unusual and that a single wooden chair had been placed in the center of the main room, with the photographs oriented to face it from every wall. Then the article moved on to the arraignment schedule. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after I read that. I got out a notebook and I did the math. 48 Saturdays, give or take, though he'd missed a handful, average 8 or 9 photos a visit. I sold him at least 400, probably closer to 5. Every one of them a face, every one of them a stranger, looking straight ahead, looking at nothing when he pinned them to his wall, and then looking at whatever he put in the middle of the room, facing the chair. I didn't call anybody. I want to say I thought about it and decided not to, but that isn't honest. I waited to see if somebody would call me. The market keeps vendor records. My name is on a booth agreement. If they'd wanted to trace where the photographs came from, it wouldn't have been hard. A week went by, 2, then a month. Nobody called. No detective, no reporter, nobody from the DA's office. I checked the news every few days for a while. The case moved forward on the original charges. The photographs kept getting mentioned in passing, always in that same careful language. Items of interest, unusual arrangement. I never saw a description of what the chair was for. I never saw a photograph of the room. Whatever it was he did in there, on the Saturdays between his visits to my booth, isn't in anything I can find. I still work the market. I moved my booth 2 aisles over that spring and told the manager it was for the light. I don't sell loose photographs anymore. If they come in a lot, I kept them in a plastic bin in my garage. I haven't been able to throw them out, but I haven't been able to look at them either. Sometimes I think about the 11 he bought that last Saturday. I remember 4 of the faces. An older woman in a hat, a young man in a Navy uniform, a girl of maybe 19 with her hair pined up, a man in a suit that didn't fit him. I hope wherever they are now, someone took them down. The first thing I noticed wasn't the women, it was the men in the hallway. Our clinic sits about 40 minutes outside Cedar City, off a stretch of State Road where the cell service drops halfway through any conversation. Small building, 4 exam rooms, 1 ultrasound, and a waiting area that fits maybe 8 people if nobody minds sharing an armrest. I took the job in early 2020 because I wanted quiet after residency. For about a year, I got it. The first appointment was on a Tuesday in March. I remember because we'd just had one of those late snows that kills the crocuses. The woman on my schedule was listed as 26, first pregnancy, self-pay. She came in wearing a long prairie dress, hair braided down her back, no makeup. Nothing unusual for that part of Utah. What was unusual was the man who walked her in. He looked about 50. He didn't sit in the waiting room. He stood in the hallway outside my exam room and folded his arms. My nurse asked if he wanted a chair. He said no. He said he'd wait right there. Inside the room, the woman was polite, quiet. She answered basic questions in single words. Yes, no, fine. When I asked about her diet, she nodded. When I asked if this was her first pregnancy, she nodded again. But when I asked if she was taking any medications, she looked at the door. Then she shook her head. She didn't say the word. I didn't think much of it. People get shy. First-time patients get shy. I finished the exam, gave her the prenatal packet, and told her to schedule a follow-up in 4 weeks. The next week, a different woman came in. Similar dress, similar braid, similar age on paper, though she looked younger up close. And in the hallway, a different man, maybe 40, same posture, arms folded, standing. He also said no to the chair. By the end of that month, I had seen 6 of them, 6 women, 6 men, all from the same zip code up in the hills near a town I'll just call by its initials, TV. My nurse pulled the intake forms and noticed the addresses matched within a mile of each other. Same road, different house numbers, same emergency contact name on 4 of them. The pattern in the exam room was what got me. They didn't speak about anything personal, not out loud. If I asked about their menstrual cycle before pregnancy, they'd hold up fingers. If I asked how many prior pregnancies, they'd tap the table. One woman, I asked her age, and she wrote the number on the paper covering the exam bed, then crumpled it into her pocket before she left. 22. She'd told the front desk 28. I started paying attention to the physical findings, and once I looked, I couldn't stop seeing it. Signs of very short intervals between pregnancies, vitamin deficiencies that shouldn't exist in a country with grocery stores, old healed fractures that nobody had mentioned in the history, dental work that was either missing entirely clearly or done in a way that made me think someone had pulled teeth at a kitchen table. None of them would met my eyes when I asked about home. The men outside the door were the part that bothered me most. They didn't pace, they didn't scroll their phones. They stood and they listened. I know they listened because one afternoon I asked a patient a question about contraception, and before she could even shake her head, I heard him clear his throat from the other side of the door. Just once. She stopped moving. Then she looked at the floor and I watched her decide, right there, not to answer me. I finished the appointment. I walked her out. He put his hand on the small of her back and steered her toward the parking lot, and she didn't look back at me. I sat in my office after that with the door shut and thought about what I could actually do. The honest answer was, not much, not yet. If I called the sheriff, I had nothing. Adult women coming in voluntarily, receiving prenatal care, giving consistent answers on their paperwork. If I called family services, same problem. And if any of these men figured out I'd made a call, those women were going to stop coming to the clinic at all. That was the outcome I was most afraid of, losing eyes on them. So I started writing things down, not in the chart. In the chart, I wrote what I was supposed to write. Blood pressure, fundal height, fetal heart tones, the boring stuff insurance wants to see. The rest went into a separate file on my personal laptop. In shorthand, that would only mean something to another OB. I used ICD codes for things that weren't quite the diagnosis. I used little abbreviations for behaviors, G for gesture-only answers, HD for hallway door. When the man interrupted, I noted the vitamin panels, the fracture patterns, the dental findings. I noted every time a woman's stated age and her exam findings didn't match up. I did that from March through October. By the fall, I had records on 11 women, 9 pregnancies, 2 who came in for something else, both of whom the men had also refused to let out of earshot. One of the women I saw 3 times, and each time her stated last name on the intake form was different, even though her face and her birthmark and her scar on her left forearm were the same. In October, I called someone I'd trained with in Salt Lake, who works with the State Medical Association on physician advocacy. I told her I had a documentation problem I needed help interpreting. She drove down that weekend. I made coffee and I gave her the file. She read it for about 20 minutes without saying anything. Then she looked up and asked me if I understood what I was looking at. I said I thought I did. She said we needed to loop in the state, and we needed to do it carefully, because if it went sideways in the news first, those women would disappear into that community, and we would never see them again. She was very clear about that. Careful, slow, quiet. It took almost a year from that conversation to the day the operation actually happened. I kept seeing patients that whole time. The men kept standing in the hallway. I kept smiling at them and offering them chairs they never took, and I kept writing down what I saw. Social services built the case on their end. The medical association handled the physician side. I was told almost nothing about the timeline until about a week before, when someone from the state called me and said, "Thursday, keep your regular schedule, act normal, don't come in early." I acted normal. I don't know all of what happened up in those hills that Thursday. I know some of what came after, because a few of those women ended up as patients of mine again later, on their own, walking in alone, sitting in the chair across from my desk, telling me things out loud that I had only ever seen them mouth or gesture before. One of them, the one who'd written her real age on the exam paper, came in about 6 months after. She sat in my office for a long time before she said anything. Then she said thank you. Then she asked me how I'd known. I told her the truth. I told her I hadn't known. I'd just written things down. She nodded. She said that was enough. I've been servicing bank vaults for 11 years, and until November of 2021, I would have told you the most interesting thing I ever found in a safety deposit box was a jar of baby teeth. That story got beat, and I still don't know by how much. Let me back up. I work as a contractor for a security firm out of Kansas City. Most of what we do is boring maintenance. Testing the seals on vault doors, calibrating the biometric locks, running diagnostics on the box tracking software. Every bank we service has an inventory system that logs the weight of each safety deposit box during routine sweeps. It's not about knowing what's inside. It's about making sure boxes haven't been tampered with, or that something hasn't leaked, or that a customer isn't storing something they contractually shouldn't be. Firearms, mostly. Sometimes food, believe it or not. That week, I was working a branch off Ward Parkway near the Country Club Plaza. Old building, marble columns, one of those places where you can smell the wood polish from the parking lot. The vault was in the basement, and the deposit box room was through a second door past that. I'd been there maybe half a dozen times over the years, and I liked the guy who ran the branch. A manager named Wes, quiet, polite, wore the same style of blue button-down every visit. I was doing a standard sweep. You walk each row with a handheld reader that scans the ID tag on every box and cross-references its weight against the last recorded reading. Most of the time, you get a green tick and you move on. Occasional yellow flags for tiny variances, which is normal. People add papers, take out a watch, whatever. Row 4, box 217, gave me a red. Red is unusual. Red means the weight deviated by more than 2 pounds since the last scan. 2 pounds is a lot inside a container that's usually holding envelopes and jewelry. I ran it a second time, thinking my reader had glitched. Same result. Protocol says I flag it and call the branch manager, so I did. Wes came down about 10 minutes later with his keyring and a clipboard. He asked me to walk him through the reading, and I did. He nodded slowly, like he was calculating something in his head, and then he said, "We can open it under maintenance authority if you're documenting a fault. You okay to witness?" I said sure. Here's the thing about opening a box under bank authority. It's rare, but it's a real process. There has to be a technical reason, a witness, and a written record. Wes photographed the reader display. He photographed the box. He put on gloves. Then he used the master, and I used the customer side keyway, which we override with a maintenance tool, and we pulled the drawer. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not bad, just off. Warm plastic, and something like old coffee. That should have been my first sign, honestly, because a sealed metal drawer shouldn't smell like anything. Wes lifted the lid. Inside were 5 cell phones, different models, different brands, arranged in a rough fan shape so their cameras all pointed up out of the drawer. Every single one was powered on. Every single one had the screen dimmed almost to black, but not off. And every single one had that little red dot in the corner of the display that means the camera is recording, not recording, streaming. I saw the icons. 2 of them were on a call app I recognized. 2 others were on something I didn't. One had a plain black screen with just a timer counting up in white numbers. That timer read 6 days, 4 hours, and change. 6 days. Wes didn't say anything at first. He just stood there with his hand still on the drawer lid. I could hear him breathing through his nose. Then he leaned forward, very slowly, and looked into the cameras. I looked too. I couldn't help it. You have to understand, my face was already in the frame. Had been from the second the drawer came out. Whatever was on the other end of those streams had watched me pull the drawer, had watched Wes's gloved hand, had watched me lean in and squint at a timer that meant somebody had been receiving footage from inside a bank vault for almost a week. Wes said quietly, "Don't touch them." I hadn't planned to. He reached across the drawer and, one by one, pressed the power button on each phone until the screens went dark. He didn't pull the batteries, didn't cover the lenses with his hand first, nothing dramatic. Just held the button on each one until it shut down. His hands were steady, mine weren't. "Stay here," he said. He was gone maybe 4 minutes. When he came back, he had 2 guys from bank security with him, and one of them was already on a radio. The phones went into a lockbox. The drawer stayed open. I stood in the corner of the room with my back against a wall of other people's private property and tried to remember if I'd said anything out loud while I was scanning that row. I couldn't. That's the part that got me. I couldn't remember what I'd said. They asked me to write a statement. I wrote what I saw. Wes wrote his. The box, they told me later, was registered to a corporate client. The paperwork traced back through 2 layers to a shell company in Belize. The listed contact was a P.O. box that didn't exist. Nobody had physically accessed Box 217 in 410 months, according to the entry log. 14 months, and the last person to sign in had used a name and ID that came back clean on a first pass and completely fake on the second, which meant somebody had gotten those phones in there over a year ago, in a way the branch couldn't reconstruct, and somebody had been swapping them out or servicing them since, in a way the branch also couldn't reconstruct. The batteries in a phone don't last 6 days on standby with the camera live, not even close. Someone had been in that drawer recently. The bank called it in to the FBI field office. I gave a follow-up statement 2 weeks later to a woman in a gray suit who asked me the same questions 3 different ways and then thanked me for my time. I asked her if they'd figured out who was on the other end of the streams. She smiled the kind of smile that isn't an answer. I asked if the recordings had been preserved anywhere. She said she couldn't discuss the investigation. I asked if my face was on them. She said, "Sir, you were the person opening the drawer. Here's what bothers me, not the criminal angle. I've thought about that plenty. Money laundering, some kind of insurance play, corporate espionage against a specific client of that branch. Pick a theory. What bothers me is that for 6 days, and probably longer, somebody was watching the inside of a dark metal drawer, just waiting, watching a black rectangle for a week on the off chance someone eventually opened it. And when someone finally did, it was me. My face, close up, for I don't know how long before Wes shut them down. 2-3 minutes, long enough. I still service that branch. The bank kept the contract. Box 217 sits empty now, tagged out. I walk past it every rotation. I don't look at it directly anymore. I used to, at first, like I was daring it to do something. That got old. The thing is, I have no idea what they saw. I have no idea who they were. And I have no idea if, somewhere, on a hard drive I'll never see, my face is still citing in a folder with a date on it, waiting for somebody to open it up and look back.